See, I told you to do it. Please try. Someone just peered in and looked terrified. It's like, no, really, it's fine. There, yep, we're good. We're good. Are we going?
We're going. We're rolling ball.
Well, welcome everyone. This is, as I say, an enthusiastic group for our last Language Matters of 2015. I hope you should have in front of you this pink sheet that has our the beginnings of our spring announcement. We have the first of three events that we have listed starting in January, February. Events that are listed, and this list will of course be increasing. Check out our website. We will of course be doing a Language Matters series in the spring semester as well, so come join us for that as well. I'm Tom Garza. I'm the director of the Texas Language Center and associate professor in Slavic and Eurasian Studies. I'm so happy you chose to join us this afternoon because we've been looking forward to rolling into our fold at the Texas Language Center, English as a Second Language. It is my distinct pleasure inaugurating, I suppose, our first talk that, what I hope is a series of talks on the teaching of English ESL. Alison McGregor, who has her PhD in educational psychology and has been teaching English as a second language for over 20 years. It's unbelievable. You must have started at age 4. That's all I'm saying. Thank you. That's yeah. She currently works with international graduate students in advanced oral communication courses with international MBAs as communication coach here at UT Austin. Dr. McGregor also engages in pronunciation research related to instructional effectiveness and has studied, as a foreign language student, German, Mandarin, and Japanese. Today, talking to us on the building blocks of pronunciation training and some work that she informs me that she's only recently presented on as well elsewhere. This is exciting. We're going to hear it here at UT. Please help me welcome Alice. Welcome.
Thank you, David and Betsy, and also Megan Egley, who wasn't able to get here due to a child pickup issue. But this is very exciting, and I'm happy to be here to talk about building blocks of pronunciation training. So what I've prepared for us today is 3 blocks, big blocks. The first one is kind of instructional blocks, and I want to go through sort of a teacher's journey and talk about just what we do as teachers and why we teach, or what factors impact our teaching of pronunciation. And then we'll go deeper into building blocks of a curriculum and how to put pronunciation into a curriculum. This is actually going to be a description of a case study of one student, and it's part of a research study that we did with a student in my Axon course here at UT. And then finally, as David mentioned, the most recent work that I've been working on is the intonation of a TED Talk. We actually analyzed a native speaker and discovered this had an entire paradigm shift of how I approach pronunciation teaching because of this research. And so I hope to be able to share those building blocks with you. As a way of just a brief introduction, so when I was in high school, I had the choice of studying German or French or Spanish. Interestingly enough, we have the French and Spanish teachers here. And so the French teacher was a little weird, and my sister was studying Spanish, so of course I would have no other choice but to study German. And then I went to college and had the choice of a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Science, more language classes or math and science. So of course I said, hey, let me take more German classes. I wasn't very good at German, but I was really bad at math and science. So a tragic thing happened after that. I went to Germany as an exchange student, and I began pronouncing the word for I as ich. The correct pronunciation is ich. And I was mortified and shocked, and I couldn't believe that after 2 years of German and a year of high school German that I didn't know how to pronounce the word I. And fast forward a year, I was still working on my bachelor's degree, and I took a phonetics class, and I learned that ich, was a velar fricative. And I couldn't believe that no one told me that, and that linguists know all this stuff about sounds. I also learned that there were retroflexes in languages. And so, fast forward a year or two later, I was in Taiwan teaching English, and I started learning Mandarin, and I read retroflexes. And I was like, wow, I know what a retroflex is. I put my tongue on the roof of my mouth, and I go, shoo, shoo, shoo. Okay, so let me see if I can do this. So I walked around a lot going, shoo, 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 shoo. And I finally distinguished the three sounds of shoo, shoo, shoo. So all these stories are true, and they brought me to a very big building block of my pronunciation instruction, and actually I would consider it kind of a pillar, that conscious knowledge facilitates pronunciation learning. And all of us, as teachers, walk into the classroom with teacher cognition. These are our experiences, what we know, what we believe, and what we think about language learning, and also pronunciation learning. So I just want to pause for a minute here, and if you all can take the yellow handout, at the very top of the yellow handout, let's do sort of a 1-minute write. And I'd like you just to, when you hear the word pronunciation or pronunciation teaching and learning, pronunciation instruction, what's your first reaction? What do you think of? Just for 1 minute, just write. You can say, I hate pronunciation, pronunciation is frustrating, it doesn't work, or you can say, I love pronunciation, or maybe the linguist will say, I have a lot of linguistic knowledge, but I'm not sure what to do in a classroom. Share anything that they jotted down?
Yeah, kind of makes me sad that we don't do more of it, at least in the courses I teach, just because, in my opinion, it's just as important for communication as good grammar or knowing the appropriate vocabulary. You can't say the words, I mean, maybe speaking perfectly, perfect grammar, but if I don't understand you, it's difficult.
It's good. It makes you, if you take one step back, what is the purpose of learning the language? What is the purpose of communicating? And if the purpose is to communicate, and intelligibility breaks down the communication, then there's a certain level of intelligibility that is needed. And in fact, there's some good research on word level intelligibility and what is it that makes a word intelligible to listeners that I think is useful and practical. Any other?
I agree with what you're saying, and I also think it makes me think of really repetitive exercises, like that, and I think those are maybe less useful in my mind, or I've never done them before, but they seem less useful, whereas more useful ones seem like really clear, succinct rules for like these are things that you can think about as you try to pronounce things, which we don't have nice French classes really, or it's up to us to make them.
Yeah.
So,
So you touched on like a lot of interesting areas. So sometimes rules or something very concrete is easier to teach. Doing something repetitive, well, is that valuable or not? So, I mean, to some extent, we know that in skill development, I mean, there is some necessary repetition needed in order to develop a skill till it's automatic. But how do you do that, making it interesting and not, yeah, so that's kind of challenging. Any other?
Yes, I wrote down drilling also, and that it's sometimes a long journey to get some students to pronounce words intelligibly.
Well, and do they get there? And as a teacher, it's kind of frustrating. You want to help them, and if they don't, then it becomes, it's an awkward situation, right? You're trying to help them, but they maybe are resisting. Sometimes they resist, and they don't want to do it. They don't see the value in it. There's this whole dynamic that's really challenging and hard to deal with.
Allison has a handout about word pronunciation that talks about taking a sound, one, and repeating it for a minute or two at breakfast, at lunch, and for like weeks. And my students wouldn't do it. try. Because they, it's that repetition.
And there begins the how do you get buy-in from your students? Or how do you motivate them to do the things that they need to do that you know is good for them or that will reach to a certain level of success? So before we dive into a little more of the nuts and bolts of these things, I want to keep going with, so the things, and this will touch on us as teachers. Besides our teacher cognition, what you have probably was influenced greatly by your own language learning experiences, by your teacher training, what kind of research you read in teacher training, how much pronunciation was emphasized, or if it was trained at all. And then when you go into the classroom, or when you get a class, you probably get a textbook, which may or may not include pronunciation. There's a curriculum which may or may not spell out exactly what should be done in certain levels. Student factors. So you get a list of your students, how old are they, what level are they, what are their motivations for taking the class, and then of course technology. What kind of classroom do you have? Do you have a lab? Are you using Canvas? Now, of course, the smartphone. Every student has a smartphone. This is kind of my language lab now. All my students get out their smartphones. And in a way, all of these things really directly impact what we're doing, what we even begin to do or start to conceive of. I used to have access to the Menzies lab, and the Menzies lab was like, oh, like I had a dot-cam, I had Mac, I had PC, I had a big screen. It was amazing, the big screen, like a big screen. I could put somebody's face in, I could show their mouth position, and everybody was like, just instantly sucked in because of the big screen. I really think it had to do with that. But that went away, so now we do cell phones. So then we start planning, right? All of us as teachers, we go, okay, well, so maybe you borrow a syllabus from another teacher that's done the class before, start lesson planning. Again, setting up your Canvas page, what exercises, how to organize it. And maybe at this point, maybe the first few classes you take a pre-assessment and you kind of figure out, okay, really what do my students have? Like what level do they need? What problems do they have? I think maybe lower level students are easier in the sense that they probably have similar problems. Higher level students, as you get to higher level students, there's a range of issues, and especially if you're dealing with a lot of different L1s, what things to address. And then we have a lot of in-class building blocks. So if we put all these things together, what I'd like you to think about is which building blocks are building your pronunciation structure, or which ones are blocks. So just look at the blocks and just see which ones kind of jump out at you as things that you do well, or you feel like they support you in your pronunciation instruction, or things that kind of block you. And some could be both. I know when Canvas came out, I was really excited because of the media recorder. And so I could suddenly make an assignment where the students all recorded and it was all in one place. And it took me for probably a year, at least 2 semesters, until I realized I could use a rubric. And I could create a rubric that was really easy to grade 20 students' recordings with click, 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 click with a rubric. Any of these jump out for anyone?
Like all of them could be blocks or building blocks. So I'm having a hard time putting them in different categories because I could see where, like there are useful parts of each one. I can see where each of these blocks could be useful. But then at the same time, thinking of my own experience, like we do have a textbook that includes pronunciation, but it's not part of the syllabus, and it's not there's not time in it to do it.
Interesting. Okay,
So
so there's some
it's there.
incongruence in the blocks. Yeah. What were you going to say?
Yeah, this kind of combines feedback and technology. Using Canvas, because I've done the same thing where we have oral assignments, where they record something. As an instructor, you're able to give feedback either like typing it out or clicking things, or record your own thing. And that's something that I've done a few times, and I love doing that because I'll listen to that and I'll record. I'll model some of the pronunciation, kind of give back in that way. Time is what keeps me from doing it every single, assignment, but that's a wonderful tool. People have to use it, they should.
Yeah.
Feedback, I guess I kind of, almost for during course, I could see feedback being the larger umbrella and all those somehow fitting underneath it too.
Yeah.
And what kind of feedback do you get?
That I give my students?
Not yet.
Well, it depends on what we're doing, like if it's in class book activities or listening activities or speaking activities, it's all sort of,
all there is.
yeah, I'd say it's majority spoken feedback, but sometimes I'll write little notes and not be so direct,
Feedback is a huge area. That could be another talk.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll keep all of these pieces in mind. And then what I want to jump into is how do we bridge now the teachers, that was kind of the teacher journey, right? These are all the things that we're dealing with from our side. And now I want to move into what we create as instructors for the learner journey and putting a learner on the journey. So as a foundation, I'd like to suggest, this is something that came out in the 90s, language awareness methodology. And in language awareness methodology, Board puts forth these 5 things that a student, that a learner, it's good for a learner. So to involve the learner in these things. So just go ahead and take a minute, you can just read it. When I think about being in a classroom where there's exploration and discovery, it sort of gets exciting. And to be able to talk analytically about a language also kind of excites me. When I learned velar fricative and I knew where the sound was, it was like really exciting. The idea that you want the learner to know about the language, but also how to practice the learning skills involved. And this is a critical component. And then involving, we're dealing with people, right? We're dealing with students, so involving them in both cognitive and affective levels really, I think, important. And that kind of touches on the buy-in and how do you relate to the student and get them to understand if something's important, or having them have that kind of autonomy. And I'd like to suggest that actually we do this for pronunciation awareness methodology. If we were able to involve our students in pronunciation as a dynamic phenomenon, pronunciation is actually, we think of it sometimes, this touches on the fixed the fixed rules, and there are some discrete fixed things, but actually pronunciation changes a lot depending on the person you're talking to, your intonation, what kind of affect you're creating. I mean, and you're trying to prepare a person for their communicative acts in the future, and so to be successful, they have to be able to, I mean, and in fact, it impacts their listening. Can they recognize when someone's getting angry at them, or when they're sarcastic or ironic? These are all important things for the students to understand. And I was kind of grappling with this for a while, and in fact, after graduate school, I was quite frustrated because I had a lot of things, my brain changed in grad school, right? I went to educational psychology, I did a PhD on it and comprehensibility, and I think the first semester or two that I was teaching was kind of a disaster because I was really frustrated. How do I put into practice everything I thought and knew and had learned was good for pronunciation instruction? And so over about a 4 or 5 year period, every semester was sort of very iteratively trying to put pieces into place. The first one was awareness raising. My students don't want to be in my class. They're in my class. The international graduate students that I have, they're in my class because they have failed a speaking test and they conditionally passed. So I had to, in the beginning, how do you raise their awareness that they actually need this stuff? It was a huge piece. And then there's all these things that we know about learning. Setting goals is good, yes, of course. Declarative knowledge is good, absolutely. You need to give them learner autonomy, so they need guided practice. And I'm going to show you some pieces of all of these. So this is what my 15-week course looked like. And so what I want to do now is to describe what a student did in my class and how he improved his pronunciation. And these are the building blocks that we started with for Donggyu's pronunciation journey. And actually, this is the outcome of a research study that we did, and so it was a case study. We had 11 students in the case. We had a large group of 30 students. They improved their pronunciation. And then we had these 11 students that improved, and we wanted to know, well, what were the factors in the classroom that made them improve? And so, in terms of the learner journey, I wanted to touch base with what does the learner believe their problems are? So we asked them that in a survey. We crafted these, like I said, the assignments of how do you raise awareness? What happens when you raise awareness? What happens, does the student, if you set a goal for the student, does the student actually work on the goal throughout the semester? And then do they use it, can they keep the motivation? Do they use the instructor feedback? What kind of skill development happens? And then how the reflections revolve. So Dongyu is a Korean, you might have guessed by his name, it's a pseudonym. But he was an electrical engineer, his IBT speaking was 19, and he self-reported that his pronunciation motivation was 100%. Remember, it's a self-report at the beginning of the semester, 100% he was going to work on pronunciation, awesome. And he self-reported that his problem was accent, B's and V's, F's and P's, and L's and R's. So he seemed pretty aware of what his pronunciation problems were. Then after the first awareness-raising activity, I video my students on the first day giving an introduction, both in the first language and then in English. And this is what he described in his reflections. You can go ahead and read it.
How old is he again?
I'm sorry?
What level is he?
So a 19 of the speaking score is, I would say, a high intermediate. Yeah. If they fail the speaking test, they're not advanced level. So high intermediate. And he's writing this. This would be obviously hard to do in your lower level classes, but so he found his speech problems by watching his video. I didn't tell him anything. He just watched this video, and this is what he found some weird intonations. It was cool. And he said, I want to reduce my grammar errors and improve my fluency. So I'm like, yay, we have some awareness raising. So we set goals. His goals were a little bit different than mine. he thought fluency was more important than his pronunciation. We go through some activities throughout the class, top 10 list to practice word level pronunciation, super segmentals for bigger chunks of language. He does audio journals, he's recorded 3 times. And here's an example of some feedback. He's recorded now some field-specific words. These are fairly high level, but field-specific words. And then I'll play the feedback that he got and his revised version. And notice the weeks that this is done in. It's kind of interesting how he changes. Week 12, his pronunciation is quite good, I think.
Filter, reliability, redundancy, aberration, theory, abysmal, pangaea, incomplete, polymorphism, synthesize.
Really high level words, not bad. You can sort of guess what they are.
Hi Dominic, I'd like you to redo your top 10 list. And I want you to just practice stretching the syllables for the word. So pay attention to the pitch change in the syllables and the length of the syllables as I read your list, okay? Theater, theater. Reliability, reliability. Redundancy, redundancy. Aberration, aberration. Theorem, theorem. Abysmal, abysmal, abysmal.
So obviously what I'm trying to do there in the feedback, you can see that I'm breaking down the word into syllables, which is our basic structure to practice. And I'm really delineating the speech features that word intelligibility research says makes a person intelligible. So for, in English at least, the vowel sound of the stressed syllable is the most important. And their stress is pitch change and length. Korean speakers have a tendency to have a narrow pitch range, which is why his words were a little muffled. And I think you can hear this in week 12.
Expel, expel. Expertise. Explanatory. Exponential. Extend. External. Fallacy. Formula. Frequency. Fundamental.
So what I hear at least is like by week 12, he made clear progress on pitch change, the syllables, and his words are more intelligible. So then we go to recording where he recorded Yo-Yo-Ma. So this is kind of a shadow activity where they listen, they mark the thought groups, mark the stress, and he got feedback and then he reflected on the feedback. And so I like what he says. He says, I thought I pronounced the stress syllables long and high pitch. However, my pronunciation of stress syllables were not long and high enough to catch. And I love that because I'm quite sure I probably said that. But remember the analytical part about the pronunciation awareness? Be able to talk about it analytically. The ability of my student to know what pitch is and to know that what stress is and to know that he couldn't do it, it gave us a meta language. And meta language is so important, whether it can be super simplified. I don't teach voiceless and voice, I teach off and on, for instance. Very simple, but having a meta language where the student, and you can communicate the pronunciation features. Drill and practice and doing something over and over again is not giving them explicit declarative knowledge. They need little pieces. They need to know, what do I do differently? And this is a challenge for the teacher because you actually have to be able to recognize what the student needs to do differently. Okay, so student. We had some at-home trackers where he wrote down what he did, and he did 28 of them, 13 minutes each. He was really awesome at creating the audio journals. He loved audio journals. And in fact, what he said that he focused on was fluency and spoken grammar. If you remember what his goal was in the beginning, he said that that's what he was going to work on, and he did indeed work on it. So, even though I told him that he should work on pronunciation, he did the homework assignments, but you know. So at the end of the semester, actually I'm just going to jump to this. So what we found in his journey was, so here we have the learner factors. I think my pronunciation is this, my problems are this. Awareness raising, oh, I have something new now. We tie in the PC, I'm motivated 100%, but then at the end of the semester he said he realized I needed to focus on other English skills, not pronunciation. So at some point in the semester, he decided not to work so hard on his pronunciation, but he did in fact improve. But what's interesting about, if you think about the building blocks as a game of Jenga, you know, the big block Jenga, the big block game, like, what do you think is going to happen? We have some breakdowns here, right? And so he did in fact have a less successful journey. The measurement tool that we use, so we were measuring intonation, stress, linking, and reductions in speech. The pre-test at the beginning of the semester, post-test, we did a comparison, and he moved 2.5%. Some of the students actually improved something like 40%. It was rather shocking. And what we found when we looked across the students who improved a little bit versus those who improved a lot, the ones who improved a lot improved in multiple areas. Primary stress, linking, of course, which sort of makes sense. So any questions about these building blocks? Or about Dungyu's journey?
I think more just about kind of the methodology here. Was there any kind of correlation between the improvement, say, in those pronunciation outcomes and overall proficiency? Did they get OPI scores of any kind that went along with?
They didn't take the OPI, but the exit, they did take an exit speaking test. The exit speaking test is a holistic score, though. It doesn't break down. It's just pass or fail.
Right, but is there any correlation between that and the improved?
Yes.
I'm saying
Yes.
improved
Yes.
pronunciation means I've also improved my overall.
Yes. All of the students who highly improved, they all passed the exit exam. Yeah. That is a tricky question because if you're dealing with a speaking and listening, well, so they have multiple problems, right? Spoken grammatical accuracy, fluency, pronunciation, and everyone knows accuracy is the opposite. I mean, working on fluency and accuracy at the same time is really hard. If you have low-level students, work on accuracy because it gets so hard as they keep going. I mean, you have to work on fluency. So lower-level classes, I'm like, give them the basic building blocks, please. Give them basic building blocks. Yes, they need have very discrete outcomes for the lower-level classes. It's so much easier. Once they get to intermediate level, there's so many things that they're working on and grappling with.
Can I ask you?
Yeah, go ahead.
Did you, just how do you get numbers? You know, to me, that's a hard thing to like figure out.
You created a template to get the numbers?
Like,
or-
could you use rubrics?
So the numbers it's from a read aloud. So they read something, and we had an answer key where there were specific intonation, so like listing intonation. So we say, did they stress? We had marked on there specific places where they should have stressed, specific places where they should have reduced the word or linking. And so that's where the numbers come from.
Did you create it?
Actually, my research partner, Veronica, created it. Yeah. It was insanely tedious to, I did this, this is really a compilation of 2 semesters worth of data collection, and we did the pre and post test, and then we collected all of the information that the students created for the class. So it was kind of a good research design. It was a lot of work to compile, like save everything. Go ahead.
So on those kind of the little targets, we'll call them, did you go through like those, kind of impressionistically, say like,
Yes,
they
it was
got this,
perceptual.
okay.
All of the accuracy was perceptual. I listened to every single student in the pre. I mean, I didn't know if it was pre or post. And do I hear it? Do I hear it? And then we had iterative reliability. My research partner also listened. And was it there? Was it there? Was it not there? I mean, we're listening for schwas and linking. Did they link the words? Did they do listening intonation? Insanely tedious. But it's so interesting. I mean, I've been teaching for like 20 years, and I think that I'm a good teacher, but I've never really measured. I mean, sometimes I think their pronunciation improves, but it sounds bad.
But they have an outside test too.
Well, yes. And as you know, I mean, they also mostly fail. I mean, 40% to 60% of my students fail. But I know why. They fail because there's multiple. Because spoken grammatical accuracy, fluency, pronunciation.
The test is hard.
Discourse markers. I mean, we're really like, I'm trying to move them from intermediate to advanced level. So, yeah. Okay. Are we ready for TED Talk? Yes. Okay. So this is, Duncan actually loved this video. I played it at the beginning of the semester. I was doing it so slightly different. And this is the reason why he did audio journals every day. Why? Because this TED Talk is called Try Something New for 30 Days. And I play it for my students because I want them to try something new for 30 days. I want them to try new strategies, and I want them to speak English more often. Here's, I'll just play the first minute of this TED Talk clip, so you get a sense of the video.
A few years ago, I felt like I was stuck in a rut. So I decided to follow in the footsteps of the great American philosopher, Morgan Spurlock, and try something new for 30 days. The idea is actually pretty simple. Think about something you've always wanted to add to your life and try it for the next 30 days. It turns out 30 days is just about the right amount of time to add a new habit or subtract a habit, like watching the news, from your life. There's a few things that I learned while doing these 30-day challenges. The first was, instead of the months flying by forgotten, the time was much more memorable. This was part of a challenge I did to take a picture every day for a month, and I remember exactly where I was and what I was doing that day. I also noticed that as I started to do more and harder 30-day challenges, my self-confidence grew. I went from desk-dwelling computer nerd to the kind of guy who bikes to work for fun. Even last year, I ended up hiking up Mount Kilimanjaro, the highest mountain in Africa. I would never have been that adventurous before I started my 30-day challenges. I also figured out...
So, does anyone else love TED Talks? I mean, you just get totally sucked in, right? I mean, you like, what, so the question that my research team came to was, why do we get sucked in? Why is it so awesome? And what we want for our students is communicative success, really. It's not just enough to have good pronunciation. What we want them to do is really succeed in life. To be, especially the high levels, I mean, I want them to be effective as instructors. I'm teaching the ITA class on campus, right? So I want them to be able to have good interactions, to be really, really successful. I mean, and some of them are going to be scholars and academics in their field. So I want them to come across and be able to deliver everything that they have to offer and succeed. So before this research, I thought I did a pretty good job of teaching intonation. And I thought I did a good job because, first of all, speech perception is really important, right? Like, they need to be able to hear the sounds and the features, the speech features. So we need to have input, we need to have listening. Okay, good. So I have them mark. I want them to discover it, and I want to give them explicit information. So I explain that this is a thought group, and I say how many syllables is in a thought group. And we explain what is pitch change. So primary, the change in the stress, the length. It's a very, very declarative knowledge. They mark it. I give them a practice strategy. They play and they copy it. Okay? And then they perform it or they record it in Canvas and I can give them feedback. And I'm thinking, well, I got some solid building blocks here. I'm doing something, right? And I still think it's not bad. These are all the pieces that I'm doing. I'm giving them explicit knowledge, raising awareness, we're reflecting, they're practicing. There's a lot of parts, but it seems sound. What happens after the research is, I should mention that we did 3 layers of analysis on the research. So the first layer was interpretative, which was we analyzed the language of the talk. So was he using sentences, questions, did it sound assertive, what information was new, what information was given, where did he focus, just looking at the language. Then we did a perceptual analysis where we're like, well, what do we hear? Well, I hear stress here, so 3 of us mark, and we're marking, this was 7 utterances, we did the second speech paragraph that you heard, 7 utterances, 24 thought groups. We're marking, what do we hear, is he rising, is he elongating at the end of the thought group so it looks like it's continuing, how does he make it get engaging? We did perceived attitude too, like what is his attitude? Does he sound compelling, does he sound passionate, right? And then we did an acoustic analysis in Pratt, and we checked, well, so were the things that we heard really there, or did we just make that up? And were our rules right? So, I mean, we all had different training, and it was really interesting because sometimes we disagreed, and we could pinpoint that we disagreed because of our belief in the rules that we had in our mind. You're supposed to stress there. You're supposed to stress the final content word of a sentence. That rule was not found in our stuff. So when we put all of this together, this was sort of a novel approach to looking at intonation. We didn't just look at it acoustically, we didn't just look at it perceptually, and we didn't just look at the language. We combined all 3 and then we looked across. What's happening in the language that ties to what we're hearing, which actually ties to the acoustics that he's creating? And the crux of it is, it's all related. And so, for teaching, instead of now, my big paradigm shift is instead of starting with intonation, I'm not teaching intonation, I'm not just teaching parts. I gotta start with, what's the essence of what we're doing? The essence of what we're doing is meaning making. It's communicative effectiveness. So if I start there, everything I do changes. My students watch the video, and instead of saying, do you hear the intonation? I say, how do you think he sounds? Do you think he sounds serious, confident? And then, what impression does he give? Well, he sounds passionate. And then, sometimes I'll ask them, well, how do you want to sound in English? This changes their motivation. You're showing them a model, a successful model, and then they're like, yeah, I want to be successful. And then I can say, do you know what? I'll tell you how to do it. So, I shifted a little bit. And I'll just share what another instructor also on the research team shared. She said before she did this research, her TED Talks had kind of little relationship and context to the larger course. Right, you do a TED Talk, it's fun, you kill a week or 2 weeks doing some TED Talk exercises, okay, we're done, let's move on. She never highlighted information structure, and I myself too. We didn't look at formulaic phrases, I wasn't looking at the structures. There wasn't a real framework. I didn't use acoustic analysis, I don't have time, I don't feel like I have time. And there wasn't a lot of emotional part in terms of how you feel about the intonation, or how do you feel about the speaker, or how do you feel about your content. That was sort of not really part of it. So after we did the research, she starts with context and meaning making. And I do too. And then we spend more time on the actual language of what highlighting pieces. getting ahead of myself. If you have questions about that, I can show you a little bit of the activities that we do. And she also actually has her students record at Pratt, so she can look at their acoustics and work with them with Pratt, and then bring in the emotions. So layering, one of the things that came out of this stuff is layering. So a really simple example, not related to TED, but a simple example of the layering is I do comfortable conversations with my students, the very, very, very beginning of the semester, and I have them go research. I give them a handout and I say, okay, look for body language, look for content, look for phrasing, look and listen to the sounds, how does it sound, and come back. So the example is that somebody walks up, and you'll notice that if you want to get someone's attention, what do? They make eye contact. Right? I mean, these kind of things are not necessarily obvious to international students, or they do it in a different way in another culture. And so, what was the content? What was the phrasing? So this is a kind of teacher scaffolding. This is a scaffolded exercise where I can make them pay attention to those things in a real world situation and then put it together. So then they just bring this back to class and they report on it. And then I say, okay, so next week I want you to go do 3 of these. So they have to actually practice, and we'll practice the intonation. So we'll say, well, how does it sound? And then we'll practice, so how's it going? How's it going? How's it going? So I'm changing my intonation, and I'll tell them, well, do you want to sound friendly? How do you want to sound? Do you want to sound interested? How do you want to sound? And so the conversation, again, we're having a kind of meta-language and a kind of partnership in creating what they're doing. So that was an advantage of the layering.
Do they do that with real people or on the internet or what?
No, real people.
No, from the beginning?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they observe. I mean, I tell them, go to a coffee shop, you're on campus. I mean, go observe. It's harder in a second language setting where, well, Spanish, maybe not. You hear people speaking Spanish all the time. But just, yeah, they do it in their departments. Yeah. Okay, so we're getting close to the end of our journey. And so I just want to recap and leave some time for questions and discussion. And so I would like to highlight that you are the most important building block of your pronunciation instruction. And there are a lot of pieces and a lot of challenges, but I would encourage you to delve into and explore any of those parts that you would like to know more about that came up for you in the beginning, to continue building. And I would also encourage you to go back and look at your curriculum and look at what kind of journey do you create for your students? Because you're creating the journey by your curriculum, by all of the pieces that you're using or not using, or how you're using them. And finally, I would say that remember to start with meaning making and give your students the possibility of being successful communicators. Because especially in this world today, what we really need is successful cross-cultural communication and not breakdowns or influence in ways that are less helpful for the rest of the world. So I've left you some final thoughts that you can do later at your home office. They're on the yellow sheet, the last exercise. And thank you again for this opportunity to speak on the building blocks of pronunciation instruction.
Any questions? That's a lot of material.
Yeah,
Good
yeah, it's a lot of
good
material.
stuff here.
Where was the last slide? I'm sorry. Which? It's on the yellow?
Yeah, the exploration number 5 has some questions.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you have some really good, since you focus on pronunciation, and you have access to this technology, there's some really awesome ways of working with it with students. For beginner level students, what are quick 2-minute, 3-minute, 5-minute exercises we can do to
So do all your students have a smartphone?
Yeah, yeah.
So,
I think so.
well, and they have Google Translate.
Yeah.
So they can speak in, they can say a Spanish word. So you also talked about vocabulary. So they can speak in, and it either recognizes it or it doesn't recognize it. Like, that's a great practice, and it also gives them instant feedback. It's understandable or it's not understandable.
My students love that.
That's the first one that comes to my mind. Do you guys have like low level? You have a little more experience with the low level.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah. For the other thing for low level students, and I'm happy to share this with you. I have a list of 10 steps of how to practice the pronunciation of a word, and I model it. Everybody gets out their phones and everybody knows how to record. So they should open their recorder, and they all download dictionary.com. So whatever your equivalent is, just whatever your recommendations. And so I teach them how to use the dictionary. Okay, these are grad students, and it's a little shocking. I mean, even AP students in our program don't necessarily know how to use a dictionary for pronunciation purposes. So I teach them, count the, and the 10 steps walks them through that. How many syllables? Where's the stress? Okay, now practice. Now record, like play it, listen to the recording, or play the dictionary.com version. Record your version and listen to it. So I give them 10 steps of how to, this is the guiding practice. Then in any class, you can do this in Dropbox or with Canvas, set up a top 10 list. So that's what Dungy was practicing. So whatever, you can do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and they practice 2 or 3 syllable words. So that's something, just a simple kind of procedure that you can put into place and do it across the entire semester.
Do you use words or phrases or both?
So that's a good question, because I want to build in the scaffolding. So everybody starts with words. The reason I start with words is the fundamental building block of language, of pronunciation in any language, is going to be the syllable and the vowel sound inside the syllable. That's the fundamental building blocks. So, and it's because I work with mostly Mandarin and Koreans in my classes. Mandarins have problems with stress. So sometimes the student will just practice word level for the entire semester just to master word stress. But if they graduate, so I tell them, you graduate. So you practice for a while. So let's just say, so they're saying Monday, okay, Monday's good. Then you would graduate to, I have class on Monday. So then they record, I have class on Monday. Then they graduate to maybe a longer stretch of speech. When I'm not doing TA hours, I go to class early on Monday. So it's a kind of, so words and then phrases. If they have trouble, who was talking about specific sounds, we were kind of talking about, the other key thing is an anchor word. Love anchor words. So for every vowel sound, or some key sound in whatever language you're teaching, almost every student, if they're really, really beginners, they don't have any, but give them some easy word. So if the word is, so ah in Spanish, mama, right? So we have an ah. So they say that like ma 5 times, ma, 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 ma. And then they will say the word, actually, okay, so I'm having trouble going down. Let me give you another example. So a student just said surge. He couldn't say surge, but he could say sir. I said, just say sir. He could say sir. So I have them, the anchoring is use a word that they can say, and in your basic class, they should have one word that everybody can say for that sound. So it's your anchor. Say it 5 times, sir, 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 sir. Okay, remember what you're doing, pay attention to what you're doing. Then say the new word, sir, 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 sir. Okay, let's add the J sound. Surge, surge, surge. Again, 5 times. So all my students, anchor words has been like, it's amazing to me, especially for ESL students, I mean, you can always find a sound that they can say accurately, almost always. I have no trouble breaking the word down, finding a syllable, the syllable that they're having trouble with, then find an anchor word that they can say. Say that one first, and then they can practice at home, and keep going.
And it's a different word for different people? Because they,
Yeah, I mean, you could, so you can have them in your class, like for vowel sounds, you could have one for everybody would have the same word.
okay.
My students have so many different issues that usually it ends up everyone has a different anchor word, and I just say, what's your anchor word? I do accent modification coaching for the business school too, so some of my high level clients, they all have I'm like, what's your anchor word for and they'll say, duh, and I'm like, okay, duh, and then that's the right sound, now make that sound in this context, because the challenge is to make it in a different context. That's what happens. Any other questions? Close to 3 o'clock. Thank you all so much for coming. My email's on the handout. Happy to talk with any more at length.
And on behalf of the Texas Language Center, thank you again for joining us for the last of our Language Center talks for this semester. Please do have a wonderful end term, end exams, all that kind of fun stuff that happens. And join me one more time for thanking Dr. McGregor.